Hello, good evening and welcome to the National Curriculum. That's right, I'm back in my rightful hosting chair after a brief absence. Josh Parish here alongside Joey Lynch. Say hello, Joey.
Hello.
Ante Jukic, how are you, Ante?
Hello, everyone.
Nick DeBarno, are you on the same planet as the rest of us? Can we hear you?
I hope so.
Hallelujah, we got him. Ladies and gentlemen,
There we go.
got him.
I got
joining
it.
us in an incredibly prescient a bit of production work from Nick Stoll, getting us a Perth guest on the same day that Perth Glory part ways with their head coach, Richard Garcia, is Ben Smith. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. I know you could have gone with, a teenager, a young bolter, but you've gone for a 27-year-old recycled by numerous other football podcasts. So really in keeping with the ethos of the A-Liga men's.
Well, you could have fooled me, mate. I think you've got reverse Angus Thurgate syndrome. So.
Well, my dad has been balding for a few years, so it might still be coming for me.
Well, sorry to start on such a sour note, but let's talk about the Perth Glory sacking Richard Garcia and Stephen McGarry, with Ruben Zadkovic coming in as the interim head coach. You said on Twitter that you've barely remembered Perth Glory social media getting this poisonous and the fans being so irate towards their own club.
Yeah, it's been a pretty turgid 2 months on Perth on Glory Twitter, and on Facebook as well. It's been getting steadily worse as well. I've seen a lot of people referring to Garcia as a clown, and I obviously feel they had to get rid of him. I think the boat had sailed on any chance of some sort of redemption, or I don't think he was turning the team around. And the 4-1 loss last night to an 11th place Brisbane team just kind of goes to show that it was over for Garcia. Pignata said him and Tony Sage had a discussion last night and then another discussion this morning before making that decision to pull the trigger. Look, from all accounts, Richard Garcia, really nice guy. Stephen McGarry, really nice guy. Nice guys don't win football matches though, which is it's been a pretty crap couple of months for Perth Glory, for a club who are accustomed to having crap couple of months, and it feels like we've been here before. Glory fans have been here before. They are I think everyone's just tired. Like the whole Perth football scene is just tired of this cycle where Glory are somewhat competitive for a while and then they revert back to being shit, basically.
Ben?
Pretty blunt.
What's the trend in all of that, Ben? I mean, obviously regimes have come on. We've had good blokes, we've had Popolutions, now we've had Garcia, and stretching back even before that, very successful during the NSL days, obviously. Why can't this club figure it out?
Well, I mean, look, Tony Sage is obviously the common denominator in all of that. Tony is he's a very passionate man. I do not doubt his passion for the club for a second. But there's just been a series of failure after failure after failure, with a bit of success, thrown in for good measure. But it's never felt like that success was sustainable. Like even when they made the grand final under Ian Ferguson, it never felt like this is the start of something special. It just kind of felt like, okay, we made a grand final. What's next? That was the view of Glory fans. And look, I think after the Kenny Lowe era, and Sage obviously helped finance Popovic's contract, and I think there was a real desire, but hey, the club has to change. But obviously COVID put a bit of a damper on things, and no one saw COVID coming, of course, and it's hurt a lot of clubs. But Glory kind of went for the local option, the cheap option in Garcia, and they had their reasons for that. Obviously, they lost a lot of money, through COVID and whatnot, like every other A-League club. And to be honest, it just set them back so far, because what we've really seen, we haven't really seen good football out of Richard Garcia. I know they had that big final surge last year, but it amounted to nothing at the end of the day. Do you want to be playing finals every year, or do you want to be competing every year? That's the big question, because they're two very different things. It is, it's 6 clubs every year get to play finals. That's not really a marker for success in my book. Now there'll be lots of Glory fans who will be just happy making the 6 every year without really competing, because that's what they see as success. But if you want this football club to thrive, I just don't. Yeah, you need to be putting out a team every year that is, if they've got to be competing for the title, or if you are going to go the other way and play the kids, you've actually got to play the kids. And you look at the current Glory team, and it's like, hang on, let me find my notes that I made today. Giordano Colley's.
Any of us have ever done this podcast,
he's
by
got
the way.
notes. What bullshit is this?
I did my research. Out of Daniel Steins is talked about as a young gun. He's 24 years old. He's actually
To be fair, this is Australian football. Him and Nick D'Agostino, young guns.
Mate, let me tell you about another young up and comer called Bruno Fornaroli. I think he's going to make the Socceroos. But outside of Josh Rawlins, who's 17, the bulk of their young players are actually early 20s. Like Giordano Colley's 22, Pacific Nyongabiri's 22, Callum Timmins is 23, Luke Bodnar is 22. There's not actually too many young, I'm using air quotes for the podcast, apologies, young up and coming guys coming through. And then when they do have those young players, Garcia wasn't playing them. He was persisting with Jack Clisby, a centre-back turned left-back at left midfield. And there were just a number of... that was... We could do a whole podcast on Jack Clisby at left midfield, to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, sorry, and even when you look at Colley and Fitzgerald, for example, Fitzgerald has been there for a cup of coffee and has almost seen as many minutes as Colley has over the course of this season. I think they're both at around 450 to 500, I think. And you look at, I guess this is the question that I really had in mind for you, Ben, because I guess we in the East don't really get a kind of a more accurate read of things. But was there a sense among Perth fans that it would actually improve when they got to Perth and started playing games in Perth, given how lifeless they've been in terms of their football on the park?
Yeah, yes and no. There were definitely, Glory observers, Glory watchers like myself, who had seen nothing from their stint over East to kind of assure them that it would get better. And obviously, look, I don't envy what they've gone through. Every person of that Perth Glory team, from the players to Garcia and McGarry themselves, to the staff that went over for them. As Simon Hill had a great piece on Keep Up a few weeks back about the lengths that the staff went to keep that season on the tracks. They went through an arduous time, but the football on the pitch, I know there are a lot of Glory fans who thought, right, they are obviously going through a terrible time. Once we get back, it'll be okay. But the football they were dishing up on the field, there was nothing to really get excited about. Daniel Sturridge was, injured. Fornaroli was doing Bruno Fornaroli things. He was being very good, but he was having to carry the team as a 34-year-old. A lesson I wondered whether Glory would ever learn, because Diego Castro spent his entire Perth career as a 33, 34, 35-year-old shouldering that creative burden, and they never once relieved that off him. They never really signed a complimentary player to alleviate that burden. And then
however, they didn't really give Italiano scope in that year in 2018 as well, when there was that period injured. It was under Lowe. It was Lowe's last season.
Yes.
Especially after it was confirmed that he was going to leave. It seemed like they had no interest in playing him after that.
He was in the Glory squad under Popovic's first year, and Popovic just had his own view in mind, I guess, of what he wanted. But to actually return to Ante's original question, yes, there were a large amount of Glory fans who kind of thought once they get back in Perth, it will all be okay. And that illusion was shattered probably about 15 minutes into the home game against Adelaide, against a very poor Adelaide team who I was sitting watching it with my dad, and we were both just saying Adelaide are rubbish, and yet they look better than Glory. It was, I watch Isaias and I feel like Frank Costanza, this guy, not my type of guy. It was, and there was like being in the stadium on that day, there was you could feel, the atmosphere pre-game was like, quite good, even with, rising COVID cases are still, I thought it felt like a pretty good crowd. The atmosphere was good. First 10 minutes, electricity's in the air, people enjoying themselves. And then once the game kind of settled into its, meaningless husk of what it was, I think people just started to realize, the Glory are bad. But there are a lot of people who just assumed once they got back to Perth, everything would be all right, even though there was plenty of signs, such as their inability to generate goal-scoring chances during their, not even just they're bad at creating goal-scoring chances, they were downright terrible at creating any sort of, shots on goal outside of Fornaroli doing a madness.
Yeah, I mean, that's, by the way, Carl Vart's third-placed rubbish Adelaide United to you, sir. So put some respect on them. But the recruitment, I think, has to come under the spotlight here because from the start of the season, we've been saying this is an incredibly unbalanced squad with a lot of experienced forward players and very little in midfield. Terry McFlynn's name hasn't come up too much. Whereas, Perth Glory fans are usually pretty switched on about what's going on, in the front office of the club. And Jacob Burns' role, I remember, was scrutinised heavily by the supporter base. But I haven't really heard any calls for McFlynn to leave along with the coaching staff. Do you think that will come?
I did actually see a couple today on social media, and McFlynn has been, I think because Jacob Burns had played for Perth Glory, he was a bit more of a name within the Glory franchise. Fans knew who he was, whereas McFlynn, obviously, he's come over from the evil Eastern States, to borrow a Mark McGowanism. But yeah, sorry to get political. Yeah,
McGowan.
but yes, yeah, Markland, come visit one day. It's great. We'll see you in 5 years when we're actually properly open. But yeah, going back to the Terry McFlynn business, he's flown very under the radar. His role is football operations manager. I'm led to believe that's, he has a lot of, he has some say in signings, but for the most part, I guess because Pignata and Sage are kind of the faces of the club, a lot of the focus is kind of drawn towards them. Whereas you look at McFlynn, who is, kind of works behind the scenes, he hasn't come in for as much criticism, but the recruitment this year has been terrible. It's a terribly unbalanced team. I said that in preseason. Where is the creativity going to come from apart from Fornaroli? That was a problem exacerbated by the ACL injury suffered by poor South Australian winger Carlo Armento. You look at that midfield. I remember being on F&R with Josh pre-season, and we were talking about Glory central midfield, and we were saying it's Brandon O'Neill, Callum Timmins, and Osama Malik, basically. Where is the creativity going to come from? And it's not a problem just related to this season, though. As long as I can remember, Glory have failed to put any sort of creativity in the middle of a park. I think the last midfielder I remember to run the show was Georgi Shandor, the Hungarian. And look, if I rewatched Shandor's highlights from, or rewatched his game from, that season under Kenny Lowe, where Glory were, quite competitive, maybe I'd view him a bit differently. Now I'm blessed with a bit more understanding of the game, but he was the last central midfielder I can really remember, really connecting defense and attack. And he seemed to link up with Castro really well. I mean, Brad O'Neill watching the game against Sydney last week, before he got injured, every forward pass seemed to get intercepted. And when Matt's your, captain, it's not a good, it's not. He has not lived up to expectations of many fans in his first season back with his, hometown club. Callum Timmins is someone I think a lot of people. He's a tidy player, which is, he looks nice when he passes the ball, but he doesn't actually affect, attacking play much. Steins has been played as a central midfielder. He is, he's said on the record previously he prefers to play in wide positions. That's where he's most comfortable. But Giordano Colli, I think he's good, but Ante touched on, he hasn't really been given sufficient game time to blossom and show that he's worthy of, prolonged minutes. And that's, not really his fault, because Garcia seemed to yank him, and there was the Steins Colli job share. And it was like, even yesterday, I remember I was out watching my local team, supporting them. They were playing in the Australia Cup, and it was like I looked at my phone and saw Steins had, I think Steins had come on, but Colli had come off, and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Going back to the original point, just the recruitment was so unbalanced, and even when Sturridge came in, it was like, how is he going to fit into this team? No one really knew, and it was like a bit of a square peg round hole.
Sorry, Joey, go for it.
Well, I had a couple of things. Well, before I get to actually the questions for Ben, we do have a comment on YouTube from the Homer Legend. Hashtag bring back Nick Stoll.
I'm sorry, but Stoll's been replaced after that.
Yeah, no.
Fantastic display.
Oh, and he's popped up with another one. He's popped up with another one. Josh Parish looks like a young Lars Mikkelsen from Sherlock, The Witcher, and House of Cards. So there's that one. But no, Ben, I did want to ask you, so you're talking about your statement around Terry McFlynn, his title is Football Operations Manager. And I kind of got flashbacks there to Victory last season, how Paul Trimboli sort of like got that football operations role, and he was public enemy number one amongst Victory fans because, the squad was terrible, all that. And he basically just books the flights. Is there actual clarity at Glory around who's in charge of recruiting? Like, is this McFlynn's baby, or is it a weird hodgepodge where there's like 8 different voices? Like, what's the actual go? Who's in charge of Glory's recruiting? Does the club have any idea who's in charge of their recruiting?
I assume it's just some guy that presses a button when they see a flashy player come up on FIFA. Just, yep, sign.
Who's not on contract on our transfer market?
There's, take the Sardinero signing. Like, that's an import spot who was offered absolutely nothing this season. Especially considering they got rid of a very popular Spaniard who, even at 37 still showed that he could do special things on occasion on a football field. It's not ideal. And the honest answer is I don't know what Terry McFlynn's role is. A football operations manager is a very broad title. I'm not, the round I work I cover at work is not Perth Glory, it's community sport. Obviously, as a football fan, I have a huge interest in that side of the, in the our Liga, and I'm probably not best placed to answer what exactly Terry McFlynn does, but it does, the fact that a lot of people don't really know what he does, but think that he's, there's a lot of, smoke and fire on Twitter about McFlynn's doing this, McFlynn's doing that, is signing something good. But there isn't, like you said, there's not much clarity from a club about who makes these deals. It's just kind of hearsay and, the like. I think, I was actually thinking about Melbourne Victory their last season efforts, because it did sort of remind me of, this Glory outfit. The difference between Melbourne Victory and Perth Glory is Melbourne Victory have a record of sustained success on field and off field. The Glory go through cycles where they're okay, and this season kind of feels like regression to the mean.
And I was just looking back
Sorry,
I was looking back on my tweet from last October, where I screenshotted an I think it was a Keep Up article, which says the deal was a triumph. Talking about the Sturridge signing, the deal was a triumph for the database McFlynn keeps of players globally, tracking their movements and availability. Realizing that Sturridge was out of contract but keen to keep playing, he pitched the possibility to head coach Richard Garcia and Pinata. So I screenshotted that bit and tweeted, "Good to know Terry McFlynn has transfer market bookmarked." And Terry McFlynn liked the tweet. So I don't know what that tells you, guys.
114 minutes, guys. 114 minutes.
But Ben, my second question was surrounding the Glory fan base. Like you talk about, they need to figure out what they want to be. Do they want to play the kids? All of that sort of stuff. Is there an appetite amongst the Perth Glory fans base for them to become a selling club, a developmental club, basically West Coast, Central Coast Mariners, where they'll develop a whole bunch of kids and sell them off, and then maybe they'll go on a sweetheart run every once in a while, but the fans don't really mind so long as there's good vibes and they're playing the kids and all of that. Is there an appetite for that at Perth Glory, or do they need to keep trying to make splashes?
I honestly don't know, because I feel like there's a bit of a identity crisis amongst Glory fans themselves. They're just kind of almost identify with the apathy, which kind of seems to stem from a club. It's just the kind of like, I had a quick conversation with a Glory fan on Twitter today. It was just saying, yeah, it's like it's a feeling of here we go again. I don't know whether there is much appetite for them to come at developmental club. I feel like if you asked a lot of A-League fans, they would want their club to be competing, and playing the kids is good for optics and metrics and social media hashtags and whatnot. But I think most A-League fans will probably say they want to win. They want to see their team win titles. And I would say Perth Glory fans probably fit into that. I think one of the interesting things about this whole scenario is 3 years ago, Perth Glory had 55,000 people at Optus Stadium for an A-League grand final. The club has pissed that away. Any goodwill towards the club has been just so damaged by the malaise which has come from a club over the past season and a half. And some of that's not their fault, but some of that is. And every club has had challenges this last 2 years. So what do? You adapt. You have to adapt. It's kind of kill or be killed. And the Glory, going back to what you said about, do Glory fans want this club to be development? I'm not sure they can kind of afford to be a development club, because if you look at the other sports teams in town, you have the Perth Scorchers, who have just won, I think, a third or fourth men's Big Bash title and an inaugural women's Big Bash title. You have Perth Wildcats team who haven't the last time they missed the playoffs was before I was born. You have the West Coast Eagles, who are, even though it looks like they're in for a bad year, they are, generally they've won 4 flags in, their existence. And you have you have a plucky underdog Fremantle team whose fans are, haunted. But if the Glory, the Glory are probably the 5th or 6th favorite sports team in town in Perth. If they want to go down that developmental, route, good on them. But I don't think it sells tickets, because WA sports, WA people love sports and they love winners, and the Glory are not winners. You look at how successful the Eagles are. The Wildcats atmospheres are incredible. They're so much fun. Wildcats home games are awesome. Even the Big Bash games. I'm not really a fan of the hit and giggle cricket, but Scorchers home games are fun. And the Glory, I remember having a chat a couple of years ago with a friend of mine. This was towards the end of Kenny Lowe days. And he went to a Scorchers game one night and then a Kenny Lowe Glory game the next night. And he just said it was like chalk and cheese. He's a football fan. He loves his football, but he just said going to Glory games wasn't fun. And I think if Glory turned into, went down the Central Coast route, became this, development club, produced a few more guys like Italiano and Rawlins and, Trent Sainsbury as well. Obviously, he's a Perth boy. That would be really cool, but I'm not sure it helps them in the grand scheme of the Perth sporting landscape. And I think given that they are a business and they want to make money, I think they would much rather be this club who, make a splash in the WA sporting landscape, and, people write columns about them and they're always on the back of the West. I'm sure like Tony Pignata and Tony Sage will be like, well, we want to be both, but, I'm not sure if they have the capacity to be both. And I think if it came down to it, they'd rather have, sorry, go for it, Nick.
No. I'm sorry for cutting you off, Ben, but I mean, just first of all, mate, apologies. I hope I'm actually coming through all good with the internet. First of all, you brought up 2018. Not a good thing about 2018 grand final in terms of West Coast. Just a slight little point, because I was actually going to ask you about that, about Perth Glory in among the WA sporting landscape, because you actually answered exactly what I was going to ask you. Like, how frustrating is it that, in WA, there is this constant, amongst all the teams, always, up near the top, success, always in amongst the contenders, whether it's the Wildcats, West Coast,
apart
even
from Fremantle. Let's just clarify. Fremantle are not normally up near the top. Actually,
I was just about to say, I was about to say Fremantle prior to maybe 2015. But in terms of that, how frustrating is that the Glory haven't been able to have that success since the NSL days? It's been, 20 years plus since they've been in amongst it and only had 2 grand finals in that period of time. Does it get to a point where it's just like, everything else seems like it's clicking in Perth, but why can't we get it right with the Glory over here?
It definitely does. I think, like, bringing in Tony Pignata is, he's had a very good track record in the A-League men's. I have a lot of faith in Tony Pignata. I think one of the things Glory does do really well is the community stuff. They are very embedded in the community with, school camps and junior stuff and, that sort of stuff. And, they probably don't get enough credit for that. They do it a bit better than some of the other sports teams. But when it comes to the actual, game day stuff, it just feels like they're so off the pace in terms of the on-field or on-court product. Like, they definitely get lost in it. Like, even the Western Force ceased to exist and came back, and still, like, their fans don't. It didn't even, like, as soon as the Force came back, the Force fans came out of woodwork, and it was like they never left. And Glory, like, I think if like Glory went away for like 3-4 years, like the Force did, I don't know whether, like, how many of those fans would come back, because they've just been burnt so many times in the past. There's just such a track record of disappointment amongst a franchise or, a football club, which, was brilliant. I grew up going to Glory NSL games at Perth Oval. I can remember where I was sitting when Jamie Hardwell potted one from 30 yards against Wollongong Wolves in 2001. Like, I was in the crowd at Subiaco Oval when Ivan Ergic scored against Wollongong in the 2000 elimination final, which secured their first ever home grand final. And like, there's such a big football crowd in WA. Like, we saw like 55,000 Glory fans, at Optus Stadium a few years ago. You think back to all those NSL grand finals at Subiaco Oval. Like, the fans are there, but they stay away because they've been burnt so many times that runs like they had under Popovich are just kind of like, they just seem like one-offs now, and it's really sad. It's such a change from the good old days of the NSL, where they were dominating. And maybe my recollections of those Glory teams are kind of tinged, with nostalgia, because I think back to those days, and all I can think is just the smell of chicken treat chips.
Well, to be fair, Ben, we do have a Melbourne Croatia fan on the show as well. So his memories of Perth Glory, the NSL.
I won't bring up. No. Look, I think it is important, and it's good that we've touched on it, because I think Perth Glory's existence as an entity has to be, or let's say the ambition and their status as a precursor for what we saw in the A-League has to be considered here when we look at, the considerations and the ambitions of the fan base, which then can transfer onto the entity as a whole. And that ambition was something that essentially defined Perth. in those early years in the NSL. You think about even how they were able to secure the services of Ljubo Milicevic, and
and Damien Murray as well. They took him off the hands of Adelaide when he was one of the best players in the league.
Absolutely. And so you consider, let's say, the dynamic shifting and Perth essentially evening out. It's almost like, to use a PMP reference, it's like the rest of the playing group, or kids actually growing physically and catching up to a PMP junior, basically. That's what Perth are like, essentially. And you do have this malaise. And so I guess that's kind of something that you have to consider when you do, let's say, think about what do Perth Glory mean. And this is something we've touched on in prior episodes as well, where I guess there is an illusory element to how they define themselves at this point in time, and how they kind of consider themselves among the natural order of the A-League and as it stands at the moment. I personally don't believe that it has to be one or the other with Perth. I think they do have enough of a talent pool from a junior perspective to be able to put competitive teams out on the pitch. I also didn't believe, speaking of a Western Australian junior, I didn't believe Brandon O'Neill was going to be transformative in the way that some might have, considering his arrival back from Buriram, the basically getting hit by the reality brick to the face when he went to Pohang. It was, I think it's something that really has to be reinforced, considering just how badly Perth have been over such an extended period of time, and how there hasn't been any intent to change or examine why Perth have been so bad for so long, because they have been so let's say nondescript for so long for the same reasons, outside of that Popovich, and there were very much the same problems that befell Kenny Lowe's years on a yearly basis, and there wasn't really any fix to that, and that's kind of repeated with Garcia taking on the team now, and and we were questioning whether Sage's intentions, with Daniel Sturridge's signing, were particularly footballing, and I'm not sure whether Perth's intentions in that respect are primarily football.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't need you to tear me up for this, Josh. I'm going to jump in just instead. But I think
take initiative like a good host would, Joey. I like that.
Yeah.
He's the starting lineup every week, man.
Yeah, so basically, also first, we do have a couple more comments. So sorry to do this to you, Ben, but
that's okay.
Taurus, Perth and Blackburn, does Ben deliberately support clubs with crap owners?
It gets even worse. It gets even worse when I tell everyone I'm a Phoenix Suns fan. Do not look up the headlines about Robert Sava at the moment. They are not fun. But I mean, well, and depending on what your definition of bad is, my American football team of choice are the New England Patriots. So
mute him. I'm muting him. He's muted. Fuck off, Patriots. But the point that I wanted to make, we talk about, investment and was it footballing or was it otherwise? It plays into what I think is going to be a really interesting view of Perth Glory going forward, in the sense that as the country ostensibly opens up, as the APL attempts to follow up on their promises of re-establishing a youth competition, what Perth Glory's involvement in said youth competition looks like. There's been a lot of talk surrounding about how what was the Y League as it ended was a useless competition because of the format. Basically, 2 conferences, it's an 8-week tournament with a final. The reason that that looked the way it did was a lot to do with Tony Sage's lobbying, because he didn't like having to pay for his youth side to crisscross the country playing all these games. He didn't really see the value in it. I mean, Tony Sage also hasn't invested a ton into his women's program when it's not it's Sam Kerr involved, a big NRI signing in Sam Kerr. So it's going to be really interesting for what we're talking about, this philosophical, what does Perth Glory as a club look like? Perth, a club constitutes just more than the men's team. And as we move forward now, as the country opens up, ostensibly the APL will begin to follow through on their promises to expand the A-League women's competition with more teams, start to bring in more games in the A-League women's, which involves more away trips and more trips on planes, as they put in place a new youth competition, which once again ostensibly should mean more games and more trips on planes for a youth team and more accommodations and more hotels and more staff. What does Perth's Glory involvement? Yes, I know. I'm deliberately being coy with it. I'm sick of being bullied. What does Perth Glory's involvement in those competitions look like moving forward? Because it's Perth Glory Football Club, not Perth Glory A-League's men's club. So I'm going to be really intrigued. I'm not sure if you have a view on it, Ben, but I'm going to be really intrigued to see what that looks like moving forward.
That's a very good point. And it kind of, when I was thinking about things I might want to say on this podcast, that was kind of some of the areas I touched on. There was a great article by Neil Bennett on, I believe it was the Women's Game, perhaps, or last week, where he talked about the fact that, Glory's women's team was, very good this year, exceeded expectations, incredible, fifth place finish, just missed out on finals. But if you look at the composition of their squad, a lot of the players are from New South Wales because,
it's basically Alex Aparkas watching NPL YouTube streams and recruiting from it.
Exactly. And look, he did an excellent job with his team in getting to finish fifth. But there's definitely, I'm in a WA NPLW Facebook group, and I have noticed, like, over the last year or so, as these kind of signings from New South Wales were announced, there was a bit of, not much, but a bit of angst at the fact that he had kind of, for the most part, overlooked the WA league. And, there's no, as I think Neil touched on in his article, there's not really a Glory Women's Academy in the same way that there's a Glory Men's Academy that plays in the local NPL and has, like, junior teams. I don't know what Glory's women's youth development looks like, in all honesty. It was I don't think they have a youth women's academy anyway. I definitely,
pretty much most A-League women's teams don't have academies. It's a real sore point here in Victoria as well.
Yeah, and that's like, let's not. I mean, I don't want to segue immediately into Matilda's talk, but that would.
We do have Pokuah on the line.
Yeah, I did. I know she was cyberbullying me in the comments saying that's NBA terms. I'm still triggered from last year.
Welcome to
there's competition. There's competition in the ranks. There's competition in the ranks. No one can be comfortable in their spots.
The last thing I will say, because I do realize we have spoken a lot about Perth, is I was thinking today, if there was another A-Leagues team in Perth, northern suburbs of Perth, ripe for an A-Leagues teams, because they're 60% British and everyone up there plays football, and it's a huge area population-wise. Unfortunately, don't really have facilities up there. But Perth have been lucky that they have no competition in town. Like, there's probably, I think there are other places in Australia which deserve an A-Leagues team before the northern suburbs of Perth. But if Glory actually had legitimate competition in town, they are, I think we'd find out a lot about Perth Glory.
Well, Josh, if we have time for one more thing, because that leads into a viewer's question almost perfectly. Ben, you've got 2 minutes to answer this question.
For the podcast listeners, serious question. Are Glory fans worried about the NSD, and could they survive being relegated? It's a long way off.
Right, speed round. Let's go. I think a lot of Glory fans don't really, care about the NSD at the moment, but I think there's a lot of former Glory fans who, are staying away, who are looking at, Perth SC and Bayswater City, who are in that, big group of teams in that working group who aren't going to be, they're not going to be part of that first wave of the national second division, but they are very keen to, to be part of some sort of second division down the line. And they have, passionate supporter bases. Also, just recently over in WA, we had ECU Joondalup, who were, the big production pipeline in terms of professional players for the men's side of the game. They have merged with Northern Redbacks, who were the big production pipeline for women's players. So we now have a third NPL team, now called Perth Red Star, even though they have no ties to Serbia. They wanted verbatim. They said, "We want the name to get people talking."
Well, certainly
we'll have to induct them into our communist 11.
But basically, Perth Red Star want to be part of a national second division at some point. Bayswater City and Perth Soccer Club also want to be part of a national second division at some point. If this, hopefully the national second division comes to fruition and and it works and eventually WA teams are allowed to join. If they kind of get going, I think you'll see some fans kind of move away from Glory and towards them.
Interesting.
Joey,
Nick?
It was funny you mentioned Sam Kerr. I think that there will be some in the WA sporting community over there who'll be hoping that the next time Sam Kerr's back in WA playing sport, it's for the West Coast Eagles.
Ben, you've sounded very much like a hater on this first appearance.
I was going to be really positive, and then I thought it would be, I just wanted to fit in with the cool kids.
Yeah, wouldn't have suited
Good
the
stuff,
time.
Ben.
Ben, thank you very much for joining us and giving us all we need to know about the situation over in Perth, the identity crisis of the Glory, if you will. WA fans, don't say we don't care about you because we just devoted the first 42 minutes of the podcast.
I think 3% of our listeners are from WA. Let's see if we can get that bumped up.
That
3% is in the studio right now.
Oh, dear. You better listen back to this episode, Ben. Otherwise, our metrics are going to take a tanking over West Coast. But it's time to move along to...
Feel free to stick around, though, Ben. Stay around.
If you would like to stick around, please do. But it's time to welcome our W League guest, Pokuah Cyberbully Frimpong.
It is what it is, guys.
A preliminary final, a Melbourne derby. It was Melbourne Victory who upset the apple cart, going through to face Sydney FC in the grand final, winning 3-1 on the day this afternoon at Amy Park as we record this. Pokuah, what was your reaction to the game?
Obviously, I'm happy for Victory. They proved me wrong. Obviously, they were the favourites heading into this game, and they played some really good football, probably their best all season. And I think we learnt more about Melbourne Victory than we did City, because City are essentially a very depleted side at this point, and they just came out there to play. Probably didn't play their hardest or the best football we've seen from them. Probably their worst, but it was good, enjoyable game to watch.
It was very open, wasn't it? I mean, Victory were just capitalising on every mistake and storming forward. I thought it was very one-sided, even.
Yeah, but I can only remember maybe one or two chances besides the goal that City had going forward. They really struggled to get Hannah Wilkinson in the game, and Stoddy didn't really get to impose her will as much as she usually does. And Victory, their midfield was just really dominant. Alex Chidiak was everywhere, and they never really were tested at any point except for maybe that last 10 minutes where City, scored their goal.
Joey, do you want to jump in?
No, watching the game, I was honestly just surprised about how bad City looked, especially in the opening stages. Now, one must acknowledge that City were coming into the game with the whammies, if you will, of heartbreaking defeat the previous week, playing 120 minutes without TJ Vlanic and without Melissa Barbieri, Bubs, who basically serves as the heart and soul of that entire team. Also the voice, but that wasn't really an issue because she was in the stands making more noise than anybody else anyway. But no, it was within Victory effect. Like, it took until the 30th minute for Victory to take the lead through what can only be described as a disastrous error from Emma Checker, playing a pass that didn't need to be made, really. I mean, we were observing during the game that Melina Ayres wasn't even ferociously pressing Emma Checker. She was more just pressing out of obligation, and she was still able to put a boot out and steal the ball and go and score. Such was the sloppiness of Checker's attempts to play it out. But up to that point, the score could have been 3-4-0 Melbourne victory based on the deluge of chances. And very few people would have argued until Tori Tumeth's 80th minute goal. City made Casey Dumont work once. Now, Casey Dumont had to produce a very good save for that one piece of work in the 11th minute when Rebecca Stott curled a shot in on target after Victory failed to properly clear across. But other than that, it was all Victory. Victory could have been 1-0 up in the 5th minute when, for some bizarre reason, a long ball from Claudia Bunge is just allowed to bounce through City's defensive lines, and for Melina Ayres to run onto it and advance one-on-one with Sally James, who, playing in her first ever final. And to be honest, I don't think Melina Ayres expected it to be that easy, given that she subsequently just put the ball out of play and didn't even find the target, ostensibly a chance that Melina Ayres buries 99 times out of 100, basically. And then you had chances after that. Catherine Zimmerman I'll tell you what, nobody in that stadium was more relieved than Catherine Zimmerman when Victory finally started to convert goals and kick away. She had one of the worst misses I have ever seen. I mean, the phrase harder to miss, it does occasionally get a workout, but no, genuinely harder to miss from that chance that she had. I mean, we were talking from our angle, it looks as though she was on a difficult angle, and then we see the replay. Oh no, she was bang in front, open goal, 3 or 4 yards out, and somehow put it wide. So Victory clearly could have been on top. And just City, to be honest, I was surprised because the previous game, the 5-1 win City had over Victory, City, Rado Vidicic and his staff, they outcoached Melbourne Victory. They just got in behind and they were able to work it. This time, they didn't have any answers. Rado Vidicic said as much post-game. Just he could tell from the warm-up that they weren't in this one. So it was surprising.
I have to drive the warm-up every week now. Like it's been pretty evident, or this week kind of encapsulated how different they have been since she went down injured.
Well, yeah, but all right, let's look at.
You can't. That's some effort merchant shit, man. Like you can't. They've been very different since then, and however much Stott has an impact in midfield with her PMP qualities. I mean, McNamara kind of tied things together for City.
No, I don't think anybody's going to be arguing that. McNamara was the thing that made City go in attack. I mean, Hannah Wilkinson, I made the observation, she's basically the big kid at under 13s level. Just, get her in behind or, let her hustle and bustle and she'll score. I mean, that's what she does. McNamara was the glue that held that attack together. And when she went down, obviously it was going to be a real challenge. But looking at Victory, watching that performance, they can beat Sydney FC. They can absolutely beat Sydney FC. Especially Melina Ayres. She gets more minutes under her belt. Melina Ayres is not going to miss the kind of chances that she had today 2 weeks in a row. No. I mean, the goal that she scored was the hardest shot she had to make, and she somehow pulled that off. But yeah, Victory, I think, definitely, especially in the midfield, if Chidiac has another game like she did today, next week, Victory will be A-League Women's Champions, I think, if Chidiac plays like that again.
Wow.
We saw some of the worst misses, I think, in today's game. With Hannah Wilkinson, missed a few. Melina Ayres missed a few. I was like, I've never been so confused by like simple chances just like going away. And Joey, you're 100% right, and the Victory probably should have scored 4 or 5 before half time. And City also just failed to create anything of any work, because ever since McNamara's gone, with McKenna having to do the role that Politano was doing for the majority of the season, she's just not as good to do that backup role and do all that extra work that Politano was doing. So making Politano have to work 10 times harder and be Holly McNamara, they've just struggled to do anything since that point.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. But also, I'm not sure that Rado Vidicic had a plan B this season in order to adapt to absent key players. And the way they had to play Chelsea Blissett as a makeshift left wing back today with TJ out with the red card. The way
Chelsea can play left back. She's not just a centre back kicked out there. She can play left back.
She's not a wing back though. There's a distinction there. I think a simpler solution would have been to go to a back four. I don't really know why they didn't sacrifice Emma Checker quite early in the contest when after she had that horrendous mistake for the goal and looked very sluggish and not like her usual self. I think she was a logical person to bring on, and you could have played Naomi Chinema.
They have no one else on the bench. They've had a thin squad. Yeah, but she hasn't played, so you're going to put her in the biggest game. Their bench is thin. They have no options. They have to go with what they have and pray that it works better. And obviously that goes down to City probably not recruiting better and have a more depth in their squad. But at this point in the season, there's not really much they can do.
I think City recruited better the most recent off-season than they did last off-season. City will be a better side next season for this one, as long as they can bring players back. I kind of drew a line through last season because, they put a brave face on it, but they effed up their recruiting in last season, coming out of the Matildas era.
And they had a hell of a talent void to fill, especially with all those Matildas players leaving. So I don't think that was ever really
They basically lost a full international side. Of the team that played in the grand final against Sydney FC, only Lauren Barnes wasn't a full senior international, and like a regular full senior international at that.
I just don't think this squad really had enough width to cope with absent key players like McNamara and Vlanic. As workman-like as she is at times, Vlanic is actually quite important on that left-hand side. And that's why Rado is yelling at her for 90 minutes at a time, because they need her to overlap to make the whole system work. And obviously, McNamara's pace and invention and ability to turn defenders around and run at defenders, super important. And the rest of the squad is essentially composed of central midfielders and centre-backs. So, once you lose that, there are a lot of samey kinds of players in the middle that don't really stretch the defence, whereas Victory have got a lot of wide players with a lot of energy, with a lot of pressing, and they played a pretty reactive game a lot of the time, barring the creativity that came from Chidiac, but it worked because, they dominated the open spaces in the way that City didn't. Ante, you're looking at me like you disagree, but is that your impression, Nick?
No. I just wanted to make one little key point. Someone mentioned, I think it was Joey mentioned Alex Chidiac, putting in a performance like that again next weekend. I hope we could see her do that in a certain green and gold tinge, because when
I see what you're doing, it's unnecessary.
No, I know. I know what this means, but I'm just saying, today was another level. She was just fantastic. There was one quote that Jeff said after the game, which I thought was quite pretty much summed up Cheats' game in terms of her effort. She was bombing down one side, putting in a deep cross, and then she lost the ball from the cross, and she's gunning it back down the other end of the second half and putting in a massive challenge before City could counter. Is what she offers just going forward in terms of her engine. It's just unbelievable. The amount of effort she puts in, and you know what? I know that it's probably going to end up in disappointment in terms of squad selection in April. but one can hope. And we all know that hope isn't a strategy, but let's just something, please.
I've
I
decided.
mean, no,
that
we're not
we
inside
all,
the bubble. We're allowed to hope all we want.
I've decided that
It's the Shadow Realm this evening.
we all clearly don't know any. We all clearly don't know any football. That's why we're on a podcast, and I think that's why we know. I don't think we're good at evaluating players. That's what the Matilda selection constantly, notifies me that I know nothing about football.
We don't even have a whiteboard. Like, what are we doing
Yeah,
here?
no, exactly.
So-
Well,
I mean,
to the
but-
Peterson test.
It was pointed out to me that Alex Chidiac, dominating midfields and all that this year, that this dominating in the midfield this A-League women's season isn't like dominating in the A-League women's than the W League a few years ago,
No,
just because the
great.
talent has gone down. But like,
Kyra Cooney crosses drop.
yeah, I would disagree in the sense that, she was the standout player in a midfield next to Kyra Cooney Cross, who I think we all imagine will be getting a call up for the Matildas in their next games. I mean, if it's good enough for Kyra Cooney Cross, surely it's good enough for Alex Chidiac. And I mean, you look at who are they playing in this April window? They're playing New Zealand. Rebecca Stott is one of New Zealand's best players, and Chidiac just dominated a City midfield anchored by Rebecca Stott. Like, surely she's good enough to play against New Zealand in friendlies just after the A-League women's season.
However much I would love to push Alex Chidiac to the moon, I'm like, this was something that lingered after the Olympics. If Tony Gustafsson didn't learn anything with respect to what the Matildas need after the Olympics, what makes people think that he's going to learn anything coming from the Asian Cup, heading into the World Cup, or heading into the Women's World Cup? And this is why I harbour, let's say, a lingering cynicism with respect to the prospect of Chidiac even being selected, let alone getting minutes for the Matildas, or let alone, Chidiac and Gorry double wielding in a midfield, however awesome that would be, however utopian a vision that might be for Australian women's football. I don't think it'll happen. Although I'd love to be proven wrong. I think
I would
she's
love
just
to be proven
fundamentally incompatible to what Gustafsson wants in his team.
I would love to be proven wrong in the sense that, like, you talk about what has Gustafsson learned. We don't know. Like, there's been no word about this review that took place after the Asian Cup. We don't know who did it, what they looked at, what the lessons were. Gustafsson hasn't said anything. They didn't play in the last international window, so there were no squads to examine, and there were no press conferences to ask him questions.
Ducking for cover, Joey. Ducking for cover while the scrutiny is on.
The domestic
assuming
transfer
for
system
review.
will fix it, Josh. Don't you worry. No, but like that is the thing. We don't know. We're going to have to wait until the squad comes out for the New Zealand games to even gain a bit of an insight into what, if any, lessons have been learned. And perhaps at that point, it's too late to provide proper scrutiny to those sort of things, because one would think the squad for the New Zealand games sort of like locks us into a trajectory heading into the Women's World Cup, because ostensibly at some point preparation mode will have to change from blooding every player you can get your hands on into actually preparing the 23, 24, 25 players I think will play at the Women's World Cup, and I'm just going to keep picking them no matter what. Is the New Zealand game the point where that starts? We don't know.
Well, Joey, why do we have to look for the future to tell us what's going to happen when he's got a track record of what his choices are? I doubt that he's learnt much, or if anything, that's going to be really relevant, because we're not going to change the style of football that we play that's going to make the Matildas do what everybody in Australia would like at this Women's World Cup. It doesn't, even if he selected all the right players, the system that we play probably won't be any good anyway. So why do we have to look for the future when the past is a great indicator already?
But he's got a new whiteboard.
I live in hope, Pokuah.
I I blame Ante. He's made me very negative, about.
All right. Well, let's just leave the Matildas chat there for now because we've got nothing to analyze because the squad hasn't come out. So we're just speculating and then depressing ourselves with our own speculation, which is probably like a negative spiral even for this podcast that the listeners should be subjected to. Pokuah, looking ahead to the A-League Women's Final. Next weekend, it's a rematch at Kogarah between Victory and Sydney FC. We were trying to work this out after the game. Joey, quickly, Polly Doran suspended, correct?
We don't know.
We're not quite sure.
We made inquiries and we still don't know.
Conflicting opinions.
We got to check the rules and see what's what.
What's the rule that's in question at the moment, Joey? I'm quite confused by myself.
The number of yellow cards that require a suspension requires.
I thought, oh, jeez, okay.
There seemed to be some visible disappointment with Polly Doran when she received that, which made me think, which is
why, asked the question. But John Didelitzer and Jeff Hopkins were under the impression that she's suspended. We weren't able to get full confirmation of that from the league in the aftermath of the press conferences. Now, our designated go-between between ourselves and the APL might have gotten word since, and that's just not informed me and Nick. But when we left Amy Park, there was a slight bit of confusion surrounding, was Polly Doran suspended or is she available for next week?
Tune in next time. Same bat time,
Irrespective
same
of
bat channel.
Back, which I remember Ante described recently as the most inconsequential position in football. So we would probably just ignore it and move on. Pokuah, the grand final, what are you expecting out of this match in terms of how it will play out? And we might get into some predictions later.
Well, I've always thought that the majority of the season, I thought Sydney are the best side in the league. I think if Victory play as they did today, they definitely have a chance, but I still think Sydney should be the favourites because they have the most consistent team from the back to front. I think the key for them is making sure Hawkesby stays in the game as relevant and allows the front three to do what they've done all season. I think it's great help for Sydney for the game to be at home because I think if it was in Victoria, I would say the Victory are probably the favourites for me. But so long as Sydney are able to control that midfield and have that overlapping play they typically do, I see no reason why they can't win that game.
We've got a comment from Ivan on the YouTube. Victory finished 4th and make a final. Is this Terry the Redeemer 2.0 with the WUC? Joey, would it make a mockery of the regular season if Victory were to pull this off after they've been flattered to deceive, shall we say?
Make a mockery of the season. The league does a good enough job of that on its own. It doesn't need Victory doing that. Victory basically played half their campaign in a month, basically, and it's an uneven fixture. Some teams play each other twice. Some teams only play each other once. On that front, I mean, in context, this Victory women's team is a better team. In the context of the A-League women's competition, this Victory women's team is a better team than the Victory men that won from 4th during that A-League men's team side, I think. You know what I'm trying to say.
Do we?
But
you said...
Goodbye, Pokuah. Mooted. I'll cyberbully straight back using my admin powers. I'll replace you with Dancing Shrek.
Or you bring Young Boy on next week. Forget it, mate.
Yeah, we'll bring Young Boy on.
Been like Colin.
No, I'm just gonna I think. I know I went hard on the Victory and Chidiac balling out can win the game for Victory, which I still think. I think Chidiac has the potential to just ball out and win a game for her side. I think it is a very tight call in this game. Like we were talking about on the podcast last week when Pokuah and Taryn was on as well. This Sydney team can be beaten. I mean, Adelaide score early in their game in the last week of the regular season. Sydney probably, the path to the premiership looks a little bit more doubtful. If if Rebecca Stock can play a full 90 in the semi-final in week 1, or if City can just not fall apart like they did, this whole conversation could be very different as well. So Sydney definitely can be beaten. It's not the foregone conclusion. It's very close to a top-up, and I know this feels like really lazy analysis, but it genuinely could come down if, the likes of who has the bigger game. Does Courtney Vine, take advantage of maybe some troubles in Victory's depth on the wing backs and get in behind and, cause havoc? Or does Melina Ayres take advantage of what has at times been some Sydney problems with defending balls into the area? You will occasionally see that back four of Sydney, they get mixed up and they lose players running in behind. And Melina Ayres is the type of player that will get into the positions that will punish Sydney for that. So if she's on fire, she could win it. If Chidiak's on fire, she could win it. So it could just basically
Your
come
defense
down.
could be terrified. Yeah.
I could hear it. I could hear it in your voice, Joey. You're starting to already sing "Freed from Desire" there. What's going on?
Actually,
Is it Shrek
still living in your
that is a good segue to my last point on this game, which is
If Hawkesbury controls the midfield, Sydney could win as well. Like there are so many individual battles that could win this.
The Victory actives that were there in the North End, Joey. You were quite critical of them singing Ivan Kelova's name. He happened to be attending the game, but
Yes, he was attending the game.
In a
Straight-
Carlton hat.
It was bleeding. It was bleedingly
In a
obvious.
bloody
that-
Carlton hat.
It was bleedingly obvious that none of the Victory fans that normally attend men's games that rocked up today had any songs prepared featuring any of the women's names.
well, that requires attending other games throughout the season.
But listen, at the same time, great energy, boys. Keep at it week after week after week next season. Maybe there can be a traveling contingent that goes up to Sydney. I mean, I know the boys have a game against the Wanderers that same night, but would you rather watch Popper versus Rudan crash against each other like that, or would you rather go and watch your girls win some silverware? So yeah, I think it was great that they came up, and you could see the girls running over and do the yeah after the game. I can't remember a time there's ever actually been enough fans in the stands for Victory's women to do that after a game before, and you could tell they absolutely loved it. Like they were having a ball doing that. So it's great to see such a large contingent of fans making noise. Just I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking a gift horse in a mouth that, maybe instead of chanting, we've got, Kalava for 5 minutes, maybe chant, we've got Gary or something, or we've got Chids. Chids is on fire. Your defense is terrified.
Is there
But let me get, I don't want to look at gift horse. It was great to see them there. Want to see them at games more.
I'm just a little bit, because Joe's brought up the point about the men's game being later on at night. Do we have a reasoning behind having those games on the same day when it is essentially the biggest game for the A-League women's season? Why is there a men's match straight after?
TV deal demands that the game's on Sunday for the women's. APL argument would almost certainly be that because of all the postponements and everything, we have to play the game on a Sunday.
At 4:05.
No, the men's game is in the evening.
But the women's game is at 4:05 in the afternoon.
Yeah,
right?
but that's for the TV deal. So it's on free to air.
I do love a 4:00 game. It's beautiful. It's beautiful stuff.
I mean, if they just push the men's kickoff back an hour, I know it's late on a Sunday, but you could push it back one. You could push it back an hour, and the fans could conceivably make it from one game to the next, or just have the men's game as a double header and have it afterwards.
But Josh,
double
they're in different cities.
Yeah, Victory are at
They're in
home.
different cities.
Oh, Victory at home. Never mind then.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Well, they could play. They could play. Surely the women's final could maybe even start earlier if they really wanted a lot more clear air.
Nick,
They can't.
Nick,
Free to air
don't
TV
even-
won't let them.
I am just saying.
Nobody wants to watch a game at 3:00 in the afternoon. It's ridiculous. Okay, please come on. No. Okay, it's not Italy.
Not
Nobody
unless
wants that.
you're calling Avondale games, Nick. Nobody else wants to watch a game at 3 p.m.
No, I think that's just Australian audiences who wouldn't want to watch a football game any earlier than 3 or 4. Like, considering every Saturday local football is played at 3:00.
Yeah, we've got no qualms about playing it earlier than 4. Just don't like watching it.
Maybe I'm in the minority. Maybe I am.
Well, hopefully some of the Victory travelling support will prioritise the going interstate. But yes, having a men's home game the same night, less than ideal. Pokuah, any final thoughts on the dub before we move on to the Roos?
Not a single thing. It was great joining you guys yet again. And Nick, just like you, I'll also be hoping my national team does some good things for me this weekend, so I'm not depressed.
Let's hope.
That's all I look for.
Let's hope.
But
Let's hope.
Are we all revealing our shirts now? Is that a thing that we're doing? Because I'm wearing an NSL shirt, so yeah. Should have revealed it before when Ben was recounting, 2001 Perth Glory highlights. But
see, this could have had like Harry Maguire, Harry Kane, Bukayo Saka, and a lot of them. But
his audio dropped out. What a shame!
You bastard.
Hey, it'll still be there on the podcast recording. Pokuah, you're going to go get your beauty sleep, so we're going to podcast long into the night without you.
I'm sure enough.
All right, good night, Pokuah.
Adios,
we can
bye-bye.
hear more from Pokuah on FNR on Tuesday night.
Football
Radio
Nation
Dub.
Radio.
Yes, FNR. Let's go to the.
Hey, that's the forbidden language of the FNR law, guys. You can't do that, all right?
Let's go to the Roos, who are shaping up for a match against Japan, and players and indeed coaches dropping like flies. Weekend at Arnie's. Nice job, Joey, with the caption there. But Graham Arnold has been ruled out with COVID. Craig Goodwin, a close contact. Who else? Moyes dropped out of the squad. No Irvine. Agree. So we're looking a little thin. I'm not going to lie. We're looking a little thin. Ben Falami and Kenny Dougal, the two players who've been called up as emergencies. Sort of emergencies to the emergencies, if you count Bruno Fornaroli in there. Actually, I'll start with Ben. You must be excited to see Bruno Fornaroli play for the Socceroos, surely. Just for sheer novelty value.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, no, in all seriousness, Bruno is an incredibly popular player over in Perth. I think he's one of a few players, not named Daniel Sturridge, but actually has some cut through with the mainstream Perth sporting media. He's been a really good player in the A-League men's for such a long time. He obviously loves Australia. He seems to really like Perth by all accounts. He's always out in Perth with his family. They seem to really enjoy it. It's really cool that he likes Australia enough to get citizenship for it. I'm not against Fornaroli playing for the Socceroos, but it's just the manner of the way it's come about. It's more of a national, the state we're in, but we have to call up Fornaroli rather than the fact that I don't. I really hope Bruno does well, but yeah, it's just a weird situation we all find ourselves in.
I'm against it.
Shocker. Go on, Ante.
Not from a personal standpoint. Like, shameless plug. I'll have something on this tomorrow. But on a personal level, I would be a bit of a dick towards my own parents to say there was, that someone would be more Australian than others or more deserving than others from a personal standpoint if they felt as though they wanted to represent this country. And Bruno Fornaroli has a right to do that. He has a personal right to do that. But on a footballing level, I mean, it just speaks to so much that goes on in this country. And I think it's a selection that was that's very indicative of how we make our decisions in football, which then impacts our estimation of footballers as a consequence. Look, and this is taking into account that he's not playing Nepal. This is these are the biggest internationals we've had in over 4-5 years. This is going back to the Asian Cup in 2015. These are our biggest fixtures since then. And we've called up a 34-year-old Bruno Fornaroli for that after a pretty transformative ankle injury in 2017. And he's been like, however much he's had to carry Perth's burden, the net gain that represents to Perth speaks a lot to his overall capacity as a footballer since that ankle injury. There have been a lot of instances where I found myself disillusioned with Australian football, but last week, this has broken me. I what the fuck are we doing?
Well, Ante, is it that there are more deserving players who you would like to see called up ahead of him?
I don't think it's about who deserves to be called up on a player for player basis. I think it represents the players we don't look at much earlier in the piece, and the players who, let's say, don't receive enough scope to be considered legitimate down the line in big games. And so you can even take into account, let's say, a Genre or a Tilio or a Hrustic. Genre, to now throw him in, which is something that we can envisage considering the unavailabilities that Australia has. To now throw Genre into that game and say, okay, fix it, kind of is an injustice to those kinds of players and the scope that they need to receive and the continuity that they need to receive. It's counter to what constitutes anything logical from building a squad.
And I'm just going to
developing younger players in that respect.
I'm just jump in real quick and saying, and you can see a scenario in which if John is thrown in against Japan or Saudi Arabia and he plays poorly, he's just frozen out again. He's tarnished. We gave you the chance and you didn't do it. Ignoring the circumstances surrounding that or that almost set him up to fail, I can easily envision a scenario like that happening. Which,
absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Ante, but I can see that happening.
Walk me through it. Walk me through the logic here, though, because Genre is not playing up front, so I don't see what this has to do with.
No. It speaks to our interpretation of footballers, and Fornaroli, in comparison to a lot of the, let's say, younger footballers in the R-Liga men's that receive scope, Fornaroli is very different to them, and the ones that are very similar to Fornaroli. Not with respect to, let's say preferences, but in terms of how they play, they don't get a lot of scope in the A-League. And I think that's what makes this such a pertinent issue and something that we can't ignore. However great a story it is on an individual level for Fornaroli to play international football, let alone for Australia. I think it would be awesome for him to play international football, and in a country that he has adopted as his home. It's a fantastic individual story, but I guess what does it say about us and the football we play and the football we interpret? I'm very torn on that.
So the issue here you're saying is that Bruno Fornaroli, as this kind of creative, incorporative forward, he likes to receive the ball into feet and lay it off and combine with players in that way. He's given the chance to do that in the A-League because he's a high-profile foreign import, at least until he's... Whereas young Australian players who could do the same job don't get
They get
the
told to
same
sperm runs in behind
opportunity.
instead.
You think about. Let's say, I use this as an example in tomorrow's piece, but you think about 3 strikers in this league at the moment this season who are probably good enough to start in the A-League and receive little to no scope whatsoever in Demi, Mohamed Toure, and Nicholas Milanovic. They're all very different. But for one reason or another, they have to jump through. Sorry to mix colloquialisms here, but they have to jump through a lot of hoops to earn certain stripes.
Well, I mean, but I don't see how any of this is Graham Arnold's fault.
No, but this was never the thing with Graham Arnold. Like this qualification phase and why it is so reflective of Australian football is not about Graham Arnold in isolation. It's about Graham Arnold as a reflection of Australian coaching. And
the fact that he did exactly the same thing when he was Sydney FC manager.
That's right.
Safari
He had the oldest team in the league when he was Sydney FC coach, because he had the capacity to not have to blood youngsters at Central Coast. And now the shoe's on the other foot. He's been crying poor ever since he took the job.
Nick, do you have something
About Bruno or about the squad?
Anything, mate. I can't tell if you have your hand raised when it's on your temple. I think you're trying to read my mind like
I'm
Professor
listening.
X.
No. I'm listening. I'm listening. I'm an intent listener, Josh.
Tell me
look.
more. Bon mot.
In terms of pure novelty value, similar to Ben, I mean, okay, it's cool that we have one of my favorite A-League men's players playing for the Socceroos, but there's so much about where we are as a nation. So I see all sorts of points of view in this instance. I think it reeks of desperation. I think that's what the selection does. I know he just got nationalised. He just got his citizenship, so it actually only just made him eligible. But I don't know. Like, I don't know if things really change if Adam Taggart's fit. I don't know if it changes if Nikita Rukovic is vaccinated. That's the other thing to take into consideration.
He's single vaccinated.
Double vaccinated, I should say. So double vaccinated, and whether, as well, Adam Taggart's fit. So look, that's another sort of subplot. But just taking my eye over this whole squad. Look, the Nick D'Agostino's inclusion, we mentioned it last week. We really wouldn't be surprised if he's included for the fact that Arnie's familiar with him through the Ollie Roos. He's scoring goals for Melbourne victory. Of course he's going to get selected. But I don't think that's really going to change things again, because as we know, with Daggers, he's a player who thrives exclusively off the break and getting in good areas based off other players' work. He's not going to change a game by himself. But also as well, he's going to give you the long throw-in option, as we saw at the Olympics, because that's a great strategy when you're looking for a goal. But the other ones, I mean, I was going to say, just for pure, just enough value, Ben Falami getting a last-minute call-up. Like, I know, Ante, you and Stephen Ganavas have ran the Vico and Mbappe train on Twitter. But you know what? It is a good story to see, like, the development of Ben Falami throughout this season. Because last season, Joe, we were saying it yesterday, and we'll talk about more when we talk about the derby, but we didn't know what Ben Falami was. I mean, he's that weird, tallish, quick striker forward who can play out wide, who can play through the middle, but gets muscled quite easily against big centre backs. He's got good dribbling.
Has he really developed?
I mean,
he's not exactly a different player to what he was last season. He's
a less confused player than what he was last season.
And I think he's put in scenarios that are more compatible to his skill set.
Exactly, he's a less confused player. He's actually being played in a manner that,
or Tony Popovich has developed him in some spectacular way that's transformed him. Okay, over a cup of coffee. Like you even have to look at Saturday.
But
I'm
he's
not-
unquestionably playing better than he did last season for whatever reason. So that's going to put him on the national team radar in a way that he previously was nowhere near.
I mean,
Development,
Am I
development or
going to
not.
be able? Am I going to be able to finish my point, fellas, or should I just stop?
Can
now?
I finish? Go on.
No. Anyways,
Can I?
all I'm saying is, it just reminds me of when you finally get a player and you finally recognize what their best role is, and that development in terms of understanding what his position was. If I was going to get to that, if you guys had let me, what I was saying is, it reminds me a lot of, in fact, and Ante, you'd probably vouch for this. It reminds me a lot, to a lesser extent, of a player like Rafael Leao over in Europe. I mean, you saw him as a striker when he was playing for Milan. He was literally looked like a fish out of water. He was getting bumped off the ball. He didn't know what his best role was. They moved him out to the left, and he became a much better player because he actually understands his role. It fit better to his strengths. And we've seen that with Ben Falami. So, look, I don't think Ben Falami is actually going to play against Japan or Saudi Arabia. But I think it's just cool to see that, he's actually getting that opportunity because, there's a certain few other players who people are clamoring for, and I don't want to go down that train to get minutes ahead of him in the Socceroos. But Ben Falami's put together the body of work this season through his performances. So I think, look, you know what? Like, really, if we're going to call up someone else last minute, like out of the players who actually have been playing football, who were we going to select? Because not many are actually getting minutes. And I'm not going to mention who I'm talking about because, I've gone down this train already too many times. And I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. I'm not going to go into it. But straight up, I'm glad to see that we're actually seeing a player who is playing well and actually getting, an opportunity based off that, not getting an opportunity based off NRI. Because if we're going to cap people off NRI, then, we'd have Alex Robertson in the squad as well.
No, we got food.
But we should cap Volpardo.
Ben.
He said it.
Ben.
We said the thing.
Ben. You said the thing. You said the thing. Ben, you said the thing. I've got nothing more to add to that because I've said my bit over the past. I don't want to say anymore. Otherwise, I'm just going to get mad. I'm going to get pissed off, and I can't. It's 10:42.
Nick is getting upset.
Right? Ben, you're 3 hours behind. If it was 7:42, I was in Perth. Great, I'd do it. But it's 10:42. I've had work today. I had little sleep watching Milan this morning. I can't get mad right now. I need to lower the blood pressure.
You sound
Nick's
a little
like
mad.
that. Nick's like that babysitter who watched Bart Simpson once and is just like, cap Volpardo. Don't cap Volpardo. Don't cap Volpardo.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Well, I have no idea how to segue from that, by the way. Joey.
One thing, 2 points on this. One tactical and technical, and just another one more landscape. One thing I'm going to be interested in coming to, effectively, the Socceroos have now lost their starting midfield from the past 2 games. They're all out. In the first half of the games against Vietnam and Oman, the Socceroos didn't play that badly.
They were good.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden that midfield is gone. So I am actually really intrigued to see what does Graham Arnold now do? Does he try to fit other players into the system that worked so well in the first half against Vietnam or Oman? Does he just go back to old faithful and the double pivot? And
Don't remember that the opposition is better.
Yeah, it's that. But to be honest, that's one thing. I'm really intrigued to see what midfield runs out. To be honest, I'm expecting Stensness to start. Would I start him? Probably not. But will he start?
I like Stensness, man.
I know, but it's the
Ante's
players
most
that
surprising
Stensness.
take, by the way.
I really like Stensness, man. Even when he was at Central
He
Coast,
did.
there was
He did
like,
really like
he
Stensness.
could play. But
It's who
I guess-
Stensness will play over, which I don't like.
But see, this is the thing. Like expecting Stensness to now perform in a game against, outside of Iran, the best team in Asia, it would be irrational and it would be overly expectant. There's that word again.
You can't expect too much,
Look, you have to, especially with midfielders, you have to integrate them better. And we've done a horrible job of that over this World Cup qualification phase. Nothing short of like negligent, especially given the opponents that we did have in that second qualification phase.
Yeah.
And when it mattered, we've reverted back to type. And so that's what's going to be like, we're essentially going to be forced to be different in a game like this. And then
Too late.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What
The
what
other
are we
thing-
expecting? Who are we expecting to start? I mean, you say you can't just throw somebody in and give them a slap on the bum and say, go on, lad, make us proud. But
Go on,
I
champ.
mean, who are we going to play?
I'm-
Like
I'm-
Jago, Hrustic, Rogic?
Yeah, I'm
No,
thinking,
Rogic is hurt. Rogic might not play because Rogic
there
hurt
you
himself
go.
playing for Celtic.
So Jago, John Rowe,
Hrustic.
Hrustic. I'd like that, but is that too?
I'm thinking it's either Hrustic or one of Dougal and Jago.
With John Rowe. Wait, so who's your three?
No, I think we go 4-4-2.
Yeah, okay, but who's playing up front in that scenario?
That would
Fornaroli
be,
and Duke.
yeah, or McLaren.
God.
so we can press.
Oh my god.
Remember, McLaren can only play the Japan game as well. So, and I get this sense he won't play at all. I just have this feeling that maybe there's a bit of underlying tension. I don't know.
Is this
Maybe
like
I'm just
when?
spitballing.
Is this like when identical twins have ESP with each other? Like they always know what the other one's thinking. Is that how you know
Well-
that Jamie McLaren's not going to play?
No, I don't. I just have a. I don't know. I just have.
Remember,
this feeling.
I don't think you
I'm
should play
going to.
because Graham Arnold was asked about Jamie McLaren in his squad selection press conference, and I almost got frostbite from Graham Arnold's response to that. So that was very interesting. But I mean, looking at this game, also hold on. I've been thinking about this game, and I'm going to have a piece about it hopefully at some point, not either tomorrow or on Tuesday in the Guardian. Like, ostensibly, as Ante was saying, these games are gigantic. They're some of maybe top 10 most important games the Socceroos have ever played since they've moved into Asia. They win them both and they make a World Cup. Terribly important World Cup given the precipitous state of Australian football at the moment. And,
Johnson's affirmations that they won't be apoplectic, or so not. Let's say, sorry, has he dropped the doomsday word yet?
Yeah, he did. It's not the doomsday scenario now because of a number of other things. But there's all that on the line. I don't think a single person in Australian football actually expects the Socceroos to do it outside of those that are doing it just based upon blind loyalty. It's like, it feels like everybody has already resigned themselves to be honest, most people have mistakenly resigned themselves to a World Cup playoff against a South American nation when they've actually got to get past the third place nation in Asia before that. But it feels like people have already resigned themselves to a playoff, which on a narrative basis, it's deliciously ironic given that we are led by a coach who has made expectation to win his defining characteristic. And now the entire zeitgeist expects them to lose in these next two games. But it's remarkable in the sense that I get the feeling everybody's just sort of resigned to playoffs now. And it feels like the week ahead and these games and the squad selection and all that, we're just, we're getting out there and we're laying the barbed wire and we're digging the trenches and we're stocking ammunition for the latest engagement in, the culture wars, and we're just preparing for just the latest round of who can fix Australian football. And this is because X happens. This is why we need to do Y to fix Australian football. It feels like the football, to a greater extent than it always is in Australian football, has just become a complete secondary consideration in this week, given everything else that's going on. I'm going to be guilty as anybody else. But it's just the scenario that we now face. Like, nobody expects the Socceroos to, maybe they'll jag a point, maybe they'll drag 2 points, maybe they'll jag a point and a win, but that won't be enough. Nobody expects them to beat Japan in Sydney and then beat Saudi Arabia in Saudi Arabia.
Can I just say the way you kept leaning on the word resign there made me think you were trying to push some kind of subliminal message. I'm not sure if it's aimed at Graham Arnold or me, the host. You want me to step aside?
I can assure everybody it wasn't that. I was trying to make a serious point, so I was emphasizing the enunciation of my words.
However much other professionals are already, let's say, pushing forward who they believe should be our next coach for the national team, while Graham Arnold is still coach of the national team.
Super interesting. Like watching
more ardent supporters. Actually, that's probably been one of the more interesting to see on the old soccer Twitter. You know how much support for Arnold has diminished, especially after the Olympics and especially after the fallout of that 11-win streak.
It's remarkable seeing that.
This point where Australian football is essentially waiting to be put out of its misery for this qualification phase over the next 2 games. It's fascinating to see, actually.
And it's been interesting watching people position Tony Popovich as the potential next Socceroos boss. And I mean, I know it was great for Melbourne Victory to push Vissel Kobe as they did, but does anybody want to see the Socceroos playing that way against Thailand, Vietnam? Like, he's won in Asia. Look at how he won in Asia. Is that the vision for the Socceroos? If it is, fine. But I don't want to see any of those people complaining about the way the Socceroos are playing if Tony Popovich gets the jog and plays them exactly how he's going to play them.
That was the rationale behind Arnold. You know,
exactly.
Look at his win record in the A-League. Like, fuck, man. Like. Oh God, sorry, I don't want to go on about this.
In fact, I don't want you to go on about it either because we've been going for an hour and 36 minutes and we haven't even touched the A-League. All right, I'm not even going to ask for last questions. I'm moving us on. Quick, let's go through it lightning pace on these A-League games. Melbourne Derby ends 1-1 again. I have nothing meaningful to contribute about this fixture. Ante has a point. Nick has a point. I will let you guys go in turn.
Melbourne had 2 shots on target with
Melbourne.
Which Melbourne?
Melbourne City.
Be specific.
Melbourne City had 2 shots on target with over 60% possession. I watched that game infuriated how they weren't able to play through a numerical superiority between Nunaresh, Curtis Good, and Aidan O'Neill against Daggers Brimmer, and how they were consistently forced into the diag. It made me sick. And then in the first half, Melbourne Victory had more shots with less possession.
Same pattern we've seen repeated over and over again in this competition.
Yes. Great game. What a game, guys. Wow, what a game.
What a game. What a game.
It was a fun game. There was pushing and shoving.
There was a lot of biff. I got to say, there was a lot of feeling in it. Yeah, we love
biff in Australian sports. Beef. You can't have biff without the boff.
Yeah, we love a bit of a
country stuff
as well. You know, it was great. Anyways,
bit of passion.
In terms of the actual game, it wasn't a good game at all. I actually found myself really bored and at times struggling to find a bit of a lead. I mean, the lead was 3rd straight derby stalemate because, well, what else really happened? We didn't really learn too much about, where City are going, where Victory are going. It just felt just the same thing. City had a late, 5-minute patch at the end where they just found this, I don't even call it a second wind, but a first wind, and almost snagged themselves a win, with a jammy late goal, which really, I mean, from those 3 chances they had between McLaren, Kolakovsky, and Curtis Good, they should have scored at least one of them. And even that little scramble with Berengay at the end, they really should have jagged one. But then you could look back at the first half and Duggar's falling over himself when he's one-on-one with the goalkeeper. Well, sorry, he'd actually rounded Tom Glover and then he was one-on-one and he fresh airied it and fell and City cleared it. That was kind of how the game was. It was a game of just weird almosts. But the one thing that caught my eye the most was the Melbourne City tifo. It just felt like, You are saying to Melbourne Victory fans about you were talking about fan attendance, and you were trying to give them stick about fan attendance. You won the championship last season, and you are still not rocking up to games. You're first on the table, and you're not rocking up to games. I think you got to remember as well, like, if you're going to call it out, at least have the numbers to back it up. The City end wasn't even full. Like, it was half full, and the Victory end dwarfed it. Like, it's like, come on, you guys are first. You guys should be rocking up to these games. You should have gotten on those fans on board to come on, the theatre goers, as you know, sometimes we say City fans are. But you can't give Victory fans crap for not rocking up last season during a COVID year when your attendances were only an average of about 300 extra people, when Victory were last and you were first, and your numbers this season after winning the league are not that great either.
I mean, we've already established that pretty much every A-League side is in a glass house when it comes to this sort of stuff.
I'm just
in a
saying,
historical context.
It's just like, you can't have a tifo like that. It's like you can pick so many other things. You can pick so many other things to roll up Victory fans about, but you decide to pick that. Like, you got to have something to back that up. You can't be saying that if you haven't got that yourself.
Nick, I think the Melbourne City actives have to look up the word irony in the definitions book. Joey?
Derby, like I said, bit of biff. Punters would have probably gone happy. Good game for the neutral and all that. Yada, yada. Game, as everybody said. And I think it was quite interesting that we have in the past talked about the conduct of coaches and to a lesser extent players when it comes to describing matches of football, particularly their ability to #dominate it or whether or not they should have won the game. And I think it was very notable after this game that both McLaren in his post-game interview with Paramount and Kisnorbo in the press conference afterwards both said a point was probably a fair result. Like, that's the most non-City thing I've ever heard. Like, they always come out and say they dominated and they deserve to win. So the fact that they didn't probably tells you how the game actually went across the length of the 90 minutes and who had the better chances to win and who probably should have won.
All right. I'm going to move us on to Sydney FC 3, Western United 0. Has anything changed? Has Aloisi's formula finally been found out?
Or is it still a case of,
you can't keep getting away with it! He can't keep getting away with it! He won't.
You know what? I've said on this podcast already, like, when are we going to see Western United put 90 minutes together? They couldn't even put 20 minutes together yesterday. And given the nature of their tactical implementation, I think you're going to get games like this, similar to how we did against Wellington away from home when they played in the Gong. And same with Sydney. Sydney weren't, impressive. However nice it was to see an Incoach play. Western United question from the comments.
Torres again comes through with another one. Do you think Dylan Wenzel-Halls is regretting his move to Western United with him getting so little playing time?
No, he's getting paid over.
I mean, okay, all right. Well, I don't know what salary he's on, Ante, but he was always going to be Priyovic's backup, right? So.
Yeah. Oh, they brought in Bortic as well. Oh, debut for Noah Bortic this week.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean,
finally,
he had a good run in the team. To be fair, whether they can play together, Prijovic and Wenzel-Halls, because Wenzel-Halls' best football at Brisbane came when he had a pivot to play off in the form of Scott McDonald. Prijovic, different player, but can play with his back to goal. So I think you could fit them both into the same team if you wanted to, but I don't think Aloisi
if you wanted to.
Don't want it. So,
It was actually that's another point. Actually, it was interesting to see Wales play as that second central option.
Yes. Anything more on this game? Sydney FC. Yes. Sydney FC winning a
yes.
game with
Oh,
Retre and
yes.
Armenian midfield.
I got one more point on Western United. I know that we probably moved on from Western United. I want to talk about Sydney. But interesting to see now how they go. Now with having to really go with Rene and Lustica as the midfield pivot now that Kilkenny's on indefinite leave. Because Credens looked very slow, like really slow, and he looks like he's taking his time. I just wonder if, are we going to see, because Jerry Skatardis looked quite nervous when he came on. It was like he just had a bit of a mare. Is it time that maybe we see Luke Giselle come out of purgatory? We can hope here. We're not in the bubble, as we said. But I think...
Too slow, Billy Bob. Sorry,
the interesting one... The interesting one will be seen this Wednesday, because the only team that Western United haven't beaten this season, other than Wellington for one game, they've lost both games against Melbourne Victory. Both teams playing short turnarounds. I think this is an intriguing contest because Melbourne City, Melbourne City, it's actually isn't a game in hand for Western United. But if Western United drop this game and some of the moving parts happen, suddenly that spot, the top two, might be a little bit precarious, and Victory start to get themselves back in. So I think just in terms of the table, it'll be an interesting one if Victory can get up and make it 3 from 3 against them. So be a curious watch nonetheless.
Shout out to you, Ante, for pointing out the step-overs that Luciano Narsing was doing. It looked like he had
They were karate kicks.
boots on.
They weren't step-overs. They were karate kicks. They were karate kicks, man.
I watched the same thing this morning. It was... I stayed on a weekly.
I mean, Sydney have signed him. He's scored a goal. He's starting up front. They got nothing to worry about.
I know nothing.
Sergeant Schultz.
Any thoughts on Sydney FC winning so convincingly with Burgess nowhere to be seen in the starting 11?
I think, Ben, you had something on Ninkovic?
Yes, just that pass Ninkovic played for, I think it was Narsing's goal.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness, what a player. Just that pass is just... It was so good. Like, it's so... You don't see enough A-League men's players who are able to play through deep blocks, or just around when, like, the defense is like, okay, we're just going to sit crowd the edge of a box, and that passing is just beautiful. It's just such a subtle thing, but he perfect weight on it. Just what a player.
One thing, however, with respect to that pass, just thinking back to the action leading up to that pass, it's like how many players Western United collapsed into the box before Ninkovic could actually get the ball. You think how much time he had to turn and kind of weigh up the situation, because Lustica already collapsed into the box. I think they had 7 outfield players past the keeper in the box. And it's, however nice a pass it was, it said just as much about Western United at that point in the game.
Can I also say how much more authoritative Steve Corica looked with a beard? I just think he should keep that going.
I think he should grow his hair as well.
Yeah, well, I'll leave that to Evan to do the edits on that one, and we can have a few more mock-ups. But I think he needs to grow the beard out, because he just looks like he knows what he's doing when he's got something to stroke on the chin.
Like
he just looks a lot more confident.
One small point on this, and I'm really sorry to again make another AFL reference, but this reminds me of another certain coach who once adopted the beard when he was under pressure by the name of Nathan Buckley, and he ended up getting them to the premiership. Well, not the grand final. We almost got to the premiership. But maybe there's a hidden formula behind it, because it was like, he actually said, Ben, if I could mute you right now, I would be, not even mute you, I'd be kicking you out of this chat.
But he's back.
Enough of this Collingwood nuffery.
No. What I was just going to say was, he actually said, I'm not going to shave until we lose a game. And he ended up keeping it for about 6 or 7 weeks. Maybe Corica has some sort of bet with the players, like, you don't lose, I don't shave. And maybe it's some sort of way to, I don't know, galvanise. I'm just talking about potential storyline there.
Now I'm thinking of the Chemical Brothers, you and galvanise.
Yeah, Bimby, like the new look. It definitely helps if you're winning 3-0, but I think you should keep it going. All right, on to
Oh,
the
sorry.
box-
Speaking of the box office Jets, lovely to see Teo get the job share reference in this weekend.
And he doubled it up with
With the box office
reference
Jets.
to TNC in the Newcastle game. These were the box office Jets we were promised.
Right, hold
What
on,
a
I'm going
call
to download
from
the
Taylor.
clip so we can all actually get a look at that.
Yeah,
Keep talking
let's
amongst
get it.
yourselves.
Too late will be the cry.
Beautiful goals were scored in this game. I think Bumal, just wow, what a performance. Wow, what a game, guys. No, Becky Nicolazzi with a lovely goal
what a player.
as well. I mean, this was box office stuff, even if Wellington folded like a cheap garden chair.
That's the it's a bit of column A, column B, this one, especially after Rufa went down. Lewis also not in this one, and that was something I had an eye on. How was Tale going to adjust with Rufa out, because he's low-key a very important player with respect to Wellington's system, and given the likelihood that, like Corica, Tale wasn't going to adjust with respect to that system, who was going to play in the places of Lewis and Rufa. So it was very interesting to see Laws again play in midfield and drop an absolute stinker like he did against Adelaide in Adelaide. They weren't very good. But again, Newcastle are starting to there's a sense that things are starting to click with Newcastle.
Ben?
Clip's ready.
Oh,
Pena with an acre of space to dictate terms. Pena. Nicolazzi. Shagging in Nicolazzi!
The Wellington Phoenix midfield and defence on the Harvey Norman replay. And just when it looked like Daniel Pena had run into a cul-de-sac, because the likelihood of him scoring with his right foot.
I didn't even have the line.
okay.
This was not box office. I had the gun set up already for this, and then the jokes have been ruined because there was no actual box office Jets reference.
That was not the clip we were promised.
I told you.
The A-League social media just...
Yeah, they've butchered it. And maybe
Should get
it's some
Shredder.
intentional scrubbing of TNC from the record. Ben, let's move on. Let's talk about Daniel Pena.
Yes. Is he the A-League men's answer to Dion Waiters in that every shot he takes, he thinks he can score? Like, I've never seen a player... Yeah. Shooters do shoot. He lined up a few weeks ago. I think it was against Western United. He tried to score from inside his own half almost.
Hold on, let me check actually.
I want to see a shot.
I want his confidence, basically, just in all walks of life. Like, you know what? Go
As
off.
Dion says, if you stop shooting, you lost confidence. So
Hey,
Daniel
0
Pena,
for
not
30
short of it.
says 0 for 9, guys.
Okay,
That's the key. That's the key.
he is the only midfielder in the league to average over 3 shots a game, and he's averaging 3.87 shots per 90, and he's way under the league average for midfielders for XG per shot. His XG per shot is currently at 0.465.
Does it have a
Oh,
psychological
0.0465, sorry.
Does it have a psychological impact on the opposition defense, though, drawing them out?
I mean,
when you know
it
he's going to
shouldn't.
unleash from range.
It shouldn't. If there's the reality that he's only going to score 5% of goals from the amount of his shots, but
players aren't robots,
I think at the same time, there's a reality among Newcastle that they have to kind of live with, with the good and bad with respect to Pena, because he is able to, in one moment of the game, change a game, and however much there is a question of net gain with respect to Pena over the course of a season, he does have the capacity to change games, and it's not like Newcastle are in a capacity of their own to be able to get multiple players like Daniel Pena.
All right, let's talk about the ultimate brain thinker move that Mr. Ante Milicic pulled.
Did you
against
watch the
Central
opening
Coast
half an hour,
Mariners.
Josh?
A triple substitution after 30 minutes. That's probably the boldest bit of coaching we've seen all season, but it did not work.
Didn't help.
They went down regardless against the Mariners in what's increasingly becoming the fixture that guarantees goals.
I will just say, I think I recovered pretty well from him just snapping back with, "Did you watch the opening half an hour?" I think I recovered pretty well to get an actual answer from him on that one.
You know what? We said very early in the season that, MacArthur are not very good. And much like Western, much like Western, you are going to get games like this where they're going to look absolutely hopeless because I think they're among the really however much the table says something like, the table can lie. And, just with respect to their capacity, their ability to actually, really win games on a sustainable level, I think, they're among the bottom 3 teams in the league.
Well, Ante, I know you have a habit of watching these games on Croatian TV, but I didn't know if you knew the Mariners are also available on Urenia Vision.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
He was unreal in this one.
You know what? He's a that strike pairing is so good.
Who's he partnered with, Ante?
Actually, good.
Who scored that goal? Was it Noah Smith or was it Urenia?
It went down as Noah Smith's goal. So he didn't get his hat trick. Also, just a bit of praise for Jacob Farrell in this one.
Didn't recognise him.
Yes, with the Fight Club shaved head. Look, but especially, leading into the Mariners' first goal, and ostensibly the play that led to Milicic making the record-setting triple sub, pretty much Farrell and Cummings were just allowed to get in behind the Bulls' defense on the left flank whenever they wanted to, and they wanted to do it a lot. It was really quite, just nice football to watch. The Kim Doog making the runs and timing it, and Farrell laying off these passes that would just hit right with the right weight for him to run onto in front of him. It was fun to watch stuff from the Mariners, who have to, one has to acknowledge that these were Mariners coming off a midweek trip to face the Perth Glory, missing a cavalcade of players that are first choice, and they still spanked the Bulls side coming off 7 days rest. It was, obviously, as we have said, the Bulls are poppycock not good, but Mariners played well. I have to give the Mariners their due.
Can I just say one thing that I love now that the Mariners are winning again is that we're getting the post-game videos.
Yes.
Now.
Yes.
We're getting the won't back down videos again. They've actually 4 games unbeaten now. It's a pretty decent run, and they've got Adelaide next Saturday at home, and I'd be backing them to go at least 5 games unbeaten. I reckon they have every chance of winning that game. We spoke about how foe Adelaide are, and I reckon that's going to be a really intriguing contest. And we speak about, we were talking about Socceroo's squad earlier. When are we going to get the cum dog into the Socceroo squad, fellas? When is that finally going to happen?
Do we think the Kandog and Arnold would get on?
Oh no, he would come. He would go to one camp and then get a permanent suspension from the national team. But I want to see it happen anyway for the memes.
I think he'd be so good for the vibes, man.
The content. Think of the content.
I think I'm going to make an editorial decision, like they do on Match of the Day sometimes, and just ignore the Wanderers Adelaide game. Because I want to finish this podcast in under 2 hours, and we have precisely 80 seconds to do
calm down, Nick Stoll.
One quick point, however.
Thank you,
oh, God. It has to be less than 30 seconds.
It will be less than 30 seconds.
Go for 10 minutes. Go for 10 minutes, Ante.
Interesting to see Adelaide be able to dribble on both sides of the wing, or both sides of the pitch with their wingers. Interesting also. Nice to see Lachlan Brook actually play some football because he came to Adelaide severely underdone. And then injured himself in the process in the opening couple of weeks, where there was that time where they played against Sydney and then he went straight back instead of playing in Melbourne. And now he seems to have recovered, looks more sprightly, looks more energetic, looks more explosive. Shut up. Zach Clough has been good. That midfield is still fucking terrible, though.
Interesting. What did you like about Zach Clough's game, Ante?
We're wrapping this up. We're wrapping it up.
I got one more.
I'm interested to hear.
Nick,
I didn't.
You were yawning during that last answer.
No. Because I'm serious. Because Zach Clough, he's a former Carlisle lad, so I've got a bit of a vested interest in him. I didn't get a chance to watch the game. How did you think Clough played?
I think he was good.
Why?
Not great, but good.
Sounds like George Bush Sr.'s autobiography.
Now watch this drive. Nah, sorry.
No, that's Junior, Ante.
I know, but I just wanted to say that because I watched that video during the week.
What's George Bush Senior's big quote? Something about not knowing the price of milk or bread.
I was referring to the Simpsons episode, but anyway.
Yeah. Just one last thing. We had a question before
And then
the
I
show.
decided not to run for a second term.
Sorry, Nick.
I swear to God.
When our
Anyways,
post 2 hours, shit gets loose.
One thing I wanted to actually answer is we actually had a question prior to the show. I've got to pull it up on Twitter, but I can basically paraphrase it. It's actually a good question for Ben, which I'll add my own little 2 cents for us, Ben. But someone asked about Ernie Merrick coaching Perth Glory. And I saw Ernie Merrick in a St Kilda polo on Friday night in the coaching huddle, which was it was interesting seeing him at Marvel Stadium, in the middle of a coach's huddle at quarter time, talking to the players, giving them tactics. And I got to say, he fitted quite well.
He didn't even give tactics in football games, let alone AFL games.
No, well, you see, Ante, it's all about the hard ball gets, and you've got to get in there and really show a bit of passion. You got to get the ball down the flanks, and get the crummers acting in, and crashing packs and doing
second balls is AFL
second balls. It's universal.
Perfect world for Ernie Merrick.
Hey, well, maybe. Well, end of the day, whatever advice he gave, it wasn't enough to beat the Mighty Pies on Friday night. But Ben, Ernie Merrick to Perth Glory, yay or nay?
Nay from me. I just think it's such a uninspiring retread. Perth needs something fresh. They need a Poochie, but not a bad, but a Poochie that actually works and helps the team improve. And they need something different. Ruben Zakovic obviously taking over as interim, which is going to be great for memes and content. He by all accounts, he's a very passionate coach, a bit like he was a player.
We noticed.
Oh, what a surprise!
The interesting thing about that for me is Chris Coyne is serving as his assistant. Chris Coyne had he is the under-20s Perth Glory coach as well at the moment. He was once a while ago touted as a future A-League men's coach because he's won 4 NPL titles with Bayswater City. When Bayswater City were at their strongest, Chris Coyne was their coach, and they were the most feared, dominant team in the WA, State League NPL. So it's very interesting from my perspective to see that he is Zadkovic's assistant when his coaching resume is, it's stronger than Zadkovic's.
Yeah, but NRI, Ben. NRI.
Well, Chris Coyne played for the Socceroos.
I mean, this is
Hey, you can't spell Chris Coyne without NRI.
Hey.
Wait, hang on.
He's
you also can't spell Ruben Zadkovic without NRI. So, come to think of it, there's a lot of A-League coaches with NRI in their names. So,
it's the name of the game. All right, I'm going to tie this off.
You mentioned you got to get Poochie. You trying to offer an olive branch to Manuel Pucciarelli to tell him to come across another ball and get him out of purgatory?
When are we going to get? Pucciarelli's just wondering when he's going to get to a fireworks factory at this point.
All right, I'm going to tie.
They're going to get mutual with him. They're going to get mutual with him. Pucciarelli died on his way back to his hometown.
Died on his way back to Italy.
I'm going to tie this off, but not before we get a final ruling on Doppelganger Corner. Of course,
Whoa, let's have a look.
that man has made an appearance before, Mats Hummels, on the program, as you can see him in the top right corner of the screen. But young Lars Mikkelsen, as the Homer legend on YouTube, alleged. Yay or nay?
Oof, no.
No.
Gosh, you look more like
I don't
Bill
see it.
Skarsgård. Josh, you're more Bill Skarsgård than young
If I
Lars
shave,
Mikkelsen.
then yeah, that's a decent shout. But hopefully, I won't be hanging out in the sewer. But anyway,
I'll tell you what, we've had enough Collingwood references on this show. You know who Mick Malthouse once told me I look like?
Who?
Paul Bettany.
Yeah, you know that Ed Gooding thinks you look like Vision. Ed
that's
Gooding
already a
calls you
running
Vision.
joke.
He calls you
Little do
Vision.
Joey.
You what? You what? No, everybody shut the fuck up. What?
Paul Bettany.
Our joke in the F&I group chat is that your nickname is Vision. The Vision
Because I look like Paul Bettany.
Like Paul Bettany,
Yes.
yeah.
What a way to find out live on air. Ladies and gentlemen, good night.
He ruined me. You know how many like that run the memes? He's going to kill me with this.
Paul Bettany and his delivery with his accent in A Knight's Tale. Run their memes. I'm helping you out here, brother.
Well, it's better than being like an...
Joey's doppelganger cable tied himself to the post at the Europa League.
and the broadcast.
All right, that's been the national curriculum.
Disrupt this broadcast.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you were rewarded if you made it all the way to the end. Thank you, Joey.
Vision.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Ante.
Go Socceroos.
Cheers, guys.